Just as a heads up, everything from this point onwards will contain spoilers for most of the Avengers films that were released before and including Endgame, so click off this video if you haven't seen or don't want to see those films. One of the most iconic scenes in Endgame was when the Avengers were losing the personal battle against Thanos and suddenly the momentum shifted in their favour once Captain America picked up Thor's hammer. In fact, due to disability, I couldn't get to the cinema to see Endgame when it came out, so I instead sat listening to crowd reactions as people illegitimately filmed the audience as they were watching the film. And the reaction I heard when Captain America picked up Mjolnir was the loudest cheer from a crowd I've ever heard, and I would have done anything to be in the cinema when it happened. The reason the crowd was so excited wasn't because it meant the heroes had a chance at winning. In my opinion, it got people excited because the twist that he could pick up the hammer was so obvious in hindsight, and it felt so right when he finally did it. All the way back in Age of Ultron, the scene where Steve Rogers nearly picked up the hammer suddenly had a whole new meaning, and people had been speculating on that scene for years. Suddenly, loads of theories came out about why he couldn't lift it at that point in time, and the most prolific one is that Steve realised he could pick up the hammer, but he didn't want to embarrass Thor. In fact, even both Joss Whedon and Joe Russo went on record to say they believe this to be true, so it became the most accepted theory. But it never really sat right with me. For starters, have you ever tried to pick up something a bit too heavy for you? You go into it giving it your all, full well expecting to not be able to do it. So can you imagine going to lift a heavy object, and then in a split second, you realise you can pick it up, but you go through this very elaborate thinking process where you stop yourself from lifting it because you don't want to embarrass someone? It doesn't make sense. It wouldn't be possible. In fact, I'm pretty sure Steve had no idea he would even be able to lift it at all. Well, my thinking paid off as Christopher Markus, the actual writer of the Avengers, recently revealed the true reason. And although the real answer isn't as wholesome, it definitely makes more sense in my opinion. But first, before you get to that, if you enjoy this video, please leave a like and let me know. I'm thinking of branching more into content about films, so I would love to know if there's an interest in it. Now back to the video. So, in a quarantine watch party, one of the only good things to come out of this quarantine, Christopher Markus revealed that Steve Rogers was genuinely not worthy of wielding the hammer at that time, but he was close. There was only one thing stopping him: the death of Tony Stark's parents. Knowing that his best friend Bucky Barnes was responsible was weighing on his mind, and I guess it could be said that keeping the truth from Tony tainted Steve's honour and worthiness. However, after the events of Civil War, Tony finds out this news, and he and Steve settle their differences once and for all, taking the burden of knowledge off Steve's shoulders and making him realise that he could have been honest with Tony from the beginning. How do I feel about this? Not great, to be honest. The idea that telling a lie is never the right answer just isn't true in this world. I mean, can you imagine if Steve told Tony what happened before Tony went through his entire reformation arc? Bucky would most likely be dead, and Tony would have been the one to do it. He then probably would have given up being Iron Man as a result of killing his best friend's best friend. And then who would have been there to stop Thanos? Telling that one little lie caused this chain reaction of events that led up to the saviour of half the universe. Is that really worth telling the truth? I know telling the truth is almost always the right thing to do, but there are cases where you cannot tell the truth to someone, otherwise it can cause a massive chain of events which will get out of hand and lead to death of half the universe. Okay, maybe that last bit isn't as true in real life, but as a general rule, there are times when it's okay to tell a little lie, especially if it's going to save someone's life. I wasn't the only person who was unhappy, although a lot of the people who were annoyed are accusing it of being a retcon, which just isn't true. I know people had theories, and I know a couple of people who worked on the film gave their thoughts on those theories, but at no point did the writer ever confirm why Steve couldn't pick up the hammer. And now that he is, people are disagreeing and saying it's a retcon. That's not a retcon. It was never on record. I understand that some people are angry with this outcome, but hopefully with all the information I've given you, you can maybe look at it from a perspective that it's a better reason than it simply being because Steve didn't want to embarrass Thor. If anything, that is the theory that doesn't make sense. So the question of the day is, how do you feel about this new information which has come out? Would you prefer it to be that Steve didn't want to embarrass Thor? If so, I'd love to know your reasons why. And also, if you had any better theories as to why Steve wasn't worthy to wield the hammer, then what would you want them to be? Instead of it being about telling a lie to one of his friends, which saved the life of half the people in the universe. In the background, you've been seeing some footage of the Marvel Avengers video game, which is going to be coming out soon, and I'm actually thinking about making a video on it. The game has been getting a lot of unfair criticism recently, but I think it's doing something that no other game is right now, so keep an eye on your sub boxes for that video to come out in a few days, maybe a week or so. If it's already out now, then I'll have a little end card up in the corner so that you can go and watch it. Otherwise, thank you for watching the video, and leave a like, it'd be greatly appreciated. If you have any questions for me, then ask them in the comments and I'll pick one of these questions and answer it at the end of my next video. In my last video, one of my most loyal and long-time subscribers asked, "This is quality content, but when are we getting a sequel to the classic toast eating video?" And I think this has already been answered for me. Thanks, fiancé, I appreciate that.